Jenna, one of the only things you have to bring to an Ultimate tournament is your cleats. And I know that every player has a cleat story. Tell us about yours.
So this was back in the day when I was at B Team Regionals my senior year. We get to the fields, we're cleaning up, and I go to tighten up one of my cleats, and the lace just pops right through the binding where it's supposed to hold the lace in place on the shoe. So I had to run around, found some duct tape, managed to patch it together. It worked for the rest of the weekend, I think for a little bit longer too, but not great to have your shoe and your shoelace come loose right at the last second, right before you're getting ready to play a tournament or a game.
Well, Jenna, duct tape works, but Tokay cleats are specifically designed for Ultimate, with a cleat pattern for the game's sharp cuts and durable, breathable, supportive build to keep your feet and ankles protected and comfortable for longer. And that's why they are on the feet of elite players like Robin Fenig, Kayla Helton, Britt Dos Santos, Lev Kowalczyk, and Mish Phillips. And you can get a pair at tokay-ultimate.com.
Welcome into Double Overtime, presented by VC Ultimate. Another week of action in the Western Ultimate League and the Premier Ultimate League, but we are almost done with the regular season, at least in the Western Ultimate League. I am Jenna Weiner. He is Sascha Vogel. Sascha, we're getting down to the wire somehow. 2 teams already in the championship weekend for the Western Ultimate League. 2 teams yet to be decided next weekend. This upcoming weekend, I guess. A little complicated thing with it.
One is already decided.
One is already decided. Thank you for the correction. We'll get there. We're going to talk Premier Ultimate League first and then talk Western Ultimate League. There's a lot to talk about in the Western Ultimate League. Scenarios get complicated. Seattle, in Colorado, Utah, Oregon, all potentially able to make it into championship weekend. We'll talk about that later. Premier Ultimate League, we are over halfway through the season somehow already. I don't understand. No team has officially booked their spot yet. However, there is already a team eliminated. We'll get to that somehow. Well, except maybe not eliminated because the whole committee pick. Unfortunately, Sascha, in a different Ultimate division, there were teams eliminated. I'm speaking of the college division, of course, and your South Carolina Gamecocks getting eliminated at AC Regionals. Tough. But hey, I mean, some great play, some great games at the end of especially what was it? Last game of day 1, big comeback victory for y'all.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. First of all, I enjoyed being there at regionals. My first college regionals ever.
That's fun.
And well, I mean, I went to BYU, so
right. I forgot.
Do the whole regionals thing.
The whole thing.
But yeah, so first college regionals, a lot of fun being there. Very intense frisbee happening. And at the end of day 1, we were playing against the bid earners, UNC Charlotte. And we went down a little bit in the first half. We were down 8-6 at halftime, and then came out on fire. Had a first throw layout block straight out of halftime that turned into a 1-throw goal. Whoa. And we just kind of rode that momentum and rattled off some breaks. They came back, rattled off some breaks, got down to the wire, and Mitch Dangler comes over and says, "Hey, the soft cap horn went off. This is Universe Point." And we ended up getting the break on Universe to win. So it was very intense, very, very, very stressful.
I'm sure. I mean, yeah, and you get freaking Mitch Dangler getting to observe your games. That's kind of fun. 8-6, most dangerous score in Ultimate, right?
100%. Because then the next day we were playing UNC Wilmington. We were down 8-6, and then ended up bringing it back to tie at like 11 or 12 near the end of the game. Wow. So
yeah, and so South Carolina doesn't go to nationals, so that was a pick not in our favor this week against Deep Look. And unfortunately, NC State Alpha somehow decided to hold up their end of the bargain this time and save Charlie and Keith. Meanwhile, my alma mater, Cal, did in fact earn a bid, or steal a bid, depending on how you want to say it, top seed in the Southwest, UCLA men's don't make it. UCLA women's do make it, though, at the expense of UC San Diego. Lots of upsets across the college division. I think, Sasha, we may have lost a deep look in terms of picks. We may have to watch Detroit Mechanics games this season. Although I was talking to Keith and Charlie earlier in the week, and Keith's saying, like, yeah, like, I don't necessarily feel like we earned it because we got some points based on, like, how the orderings ended up in different divisions, and, like, double overtime would have gotten punished by Cal finishing second instead of third in the region. So I think that our argument should be that this should just be a wash, and we reevaluate the rules and we come back next year.
I agree. Because I don't want to watch more Frisbee than I absolutely have to.
Well, and this is something too, right? Well. Like the WLPL seasons don't go as long as the AUDL season. So what happens when we get to the end of the AUDL season and we're not recording anymore? Do we have to do like snippets to submit to Deep Look, or because of the, the way the scoring system could be better, is there a way that, we do the bulk of the season and then Deep Look takes on, the last game or two just to round it out? So we'll see. I don't think Charlie will take us up on that offer. He seems pretty opposed to watching any Detroit Mechanics games this season, but you never know. All right, should we get into
Speaking
our leagues?
Frisbee.
Not the AUDL, not college, that sort of deal.
Frisbee.
Where should we start? Premier Ultimate League, now that we're over halfway through the season?
Yes, starting the Premier Ultimate League, week 6. How many games were happening? 4 games happened, and one of them went to overtime.
Yeah, and
but we'll get to that. We'll get to that one last out of all.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll do our new usual thing, folks, of doing some quick hits on games and then doing a little deeper dive into one or two games. So we'll start with one that we couldn't actually even watch because it wasn't live streamed, but thank goodness for Twitter. DC Shadow traveling to Portland to play Portland Rising. DC goes up 4-0 after the first quarter, and then wins 15-11. It was 8-4 at halftime, 12-8 after the third quarter. And that is a final 4-point margin. For those of you keeping track at home, that means that after the first quarter, the teams tied 11-11. Sasha, wasn't there something you said the other week about teams needing to start fast? Rising should have paid attention to that because it did not go well for them in this game.
That's exactly what I said. You gotta start fast, gotta start hot, or you're just gonna get left behind.
DC continues their unbeaten start. Jess O, Ashley Boog, Claire Trope, some of the notable names that I pulled from the Twitter thread. For Rising, after their initial win away at Austin, it's been a little bit tougher sledding for them. But it turns out Yuga Zhao of Boston Brute Squad, also at one point or another in the club division, is really good. No major surprise there though. And Chloe Rouse had at least a goal and assist per Twitter. So we'll talk about it a little bit more later. DC Philly on a collision course. Both teams undefeated so far, top of the East Division, and this is a division where you have a number of great teams, but only 2 will go at most, I guess. Technically, another team could go by selection of the committee, but that doesn't seem likely. And DC sitting at 3-0, Philly sitting at 3-0. It's going to be a big game this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, next game on the docket was Atlanta. The Atlanta Soul visiting Indianapolis against Indy Red. Indy ends up winning the game 18-13. Indy goes up 9-7 at half. And Melissa Gibbs had a really great game. Really great game, excuse me. She ended with 4 assists, a goal, and 2 blocks on 0 turnovers for the whole game.
Wow.
Which is incredible.
I feel like there was probably some wind too, given that it is the Midwest. So no turnovers is very impressive.
Yeah, super impressive. And I think if we are correct that although Indy did win this game, that they are essentially eliminated from postseason.
Yeah, so this is slight spoilers for the game that we're going to get into later. But Minnesota won over the weekend. to move to 4-0 in overall. Again, reminder that there are only 6 games in the Premier Ultimate League season, so Minnesota, after this weekend, already 2/3 of the way done with their games. The worst, then, that Minnesota can do is finish 4-2. The best that Indy can do, after opening with a pair of losses, is finish at 4-2. And the problem for Indy is they have already lost. One of those losses is to Minnesota. They would lose the head-to-head tiebreaker. So that would lean in Strike's favor if it came down to a 4-2 head-to-head against Indy. Indy, of course, could get in still via committee selection, but at least from my understanding, Indy's already eliminated. And I forget if we talked about this on air or not, but Austin is sitting in a similarly precarious position in the South Division as well. Raleigh, Nashville, both sitting at 2-1, and Austin needs a miracle at this point to make a run late to potentially have any chance, which is very, very slim, to take down the South Division.
Right. It's sucks that like we get like halfway through the season and we're already talking about who's getting eliminated. Fortunately.
I mean, it's just the sort of thing where it's like such a short schedule and it's also such an unbalanced schedule, right? If you had a situation where looking at the POL schedule, there's only 3 teams that have played 4 games. And one of them happens to be Minnesota, who happens to be the only team with a winning record, and that is an undefeated record in the Midwest Division. Maybe things are different if their game this past weekend goes differently. We'll talk about that. But instead, you have a situation where every other team has 2 losses already. Indy has 2 losses, Milwaukee has 2 losses, and Columbus has 2 losses. So for Minnesota, given that they are 4-0, to have any chance at this point of not winning the Midwest Division, they'd have to lose out to both Milwaukee and Columbus, and that just doesn't feel very likely at this point. And Indy, already with the loss, already sitting at 2 losses overall, you lose the head-to-head, and that's it. Again, only 6 games. Also, only 1/3 of the teams make championship weekend. That math is not going to work out in people's favor, and it just so happens that the way the schedule sets up means that we already have a team, as far as I can tell, effectively eliminated, at least from the traditional way of making it into championship weekend.
And then I guess we can talk about the next game, which essentially eliminates, if Indy's eliminated, this team is pretty for sure eliminated as well. Milwaukee Monarchs, visited by the New York Gridlock. New York wins 18-7. And it was just kind of, New York doing what New York does, and Milwaukee just not being a very strong team this year.
Yeah, and it's tough to see. Milwaukee technically has a chance. They could win out, and Minnesota could lose out. Milwaukee could win the head-to-head against Minnesota. But we're going to talk about New York's other game this past weekend. We've been hinting at it, but we're going to get to it in a moment. If you just compare the head-to-head results of New York on the road, and also their Milwaukee game was on Sunday. I think so, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So it was the second game of a back-to-back, and the margin was very different and not in Milwaukee's favor. So then if you do the head-to-head comparison, doesn't seem like Milwaukee is going to have that great of a chance. I mean, again, the thing is, Columbus and Milwaukee, both sitting at 2 losses already, would have to one of them would have to win out and beat Minnesota in the process, and that is the only way that Minnesota at this point does not win the Midwest Division. Through 6 weeks, that's where we're at. We can already basically pencil in Minnesota into championship weekend. And I mean, again, we're going to talk about the picks going forward. We have Milwaukee at Indy and Milwaukee at Columbus. Let's say that Milwaukee loses to Indy but then beats Columbus. Congratulations, Minnesota Strike. You have won the Midwest Division. Because every other team will have either 3 losses or would lose out on the head-to-head. 6-game schedules. I don't love it for these reasons, because it's just
Yeah.
so sparse. And it's also just tough with the 12 teams because either you get a larger portion of the teams in, or you only have 4 in this case, which is not ideal. Any other thoughts on the overall sort of standing situation before we jump into the best game of the weekend by a fair margin that you were on to cover? Our first overtime game of the weekend.
First overtime game of the weekend was the New York Gridlock visiting Minnesota Strike. If you haven't watched this game, go and watch it. It gets pretty intense. First off, it was delayed a little bit because there was a ton of rain in Minnesota, as is, I guess, pretty normal for the Midwest. So yeah, ton of rain was just dumping. If you like go and watch the beginning of the video, you'll just see just rain and more rain and more rain. It cleared up as the game progressed, but yeah, just to start, ton of rain. This was like a heavyweight QB battle between Robin Fennig and Yina Cartagena. Both of these players finished with 9 assists on the game.
Wait. Each finished with 9 in a single game?
Both of them.
Oh my goodness.
That's in the case of Robin's team, that's half of the goals. And for Yina, over half of the goals.
I mean,
yeah, it
not
was
surprising from 2 of the best
class.
throwers in the world, but still incredible.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was a masterclass of handling. And it was different too, because Robin and Yina are very different type of handlers. Being a handler myself, I love watching the different throws that people have. And while Yina is a little more super risky decisions and it's a lot of smaller throws and it works perfectly for her, Robin, on the other hand, will take those riskier shots and they work out very well for her. And the way that she sees the field and the way that she throws is very different than most, I'd probably say about 99% of the women's division. Like she unlocks the field in ways that a lot of people do not. So yeah, then they both racked up 9 assists playing their game. Incredible to watch. After the first quarter, I'm going to go really quickly through the game and then get to the final minutes and into overtime. After the first quarter, Minnesota was up 6-4. At halftime, up 9-7. So Minnesota was able to get a few breaks in the first half and cruised with it, I guess you could say. It went, back and forth as well. Minnesota after 3, up 14-12, still that 2-point margin. And then New York came out and they started doing this like a little bit of a junky switch defense that helped them be able to create some turnovers. And they ended up tying the game at 14s with 7 minutes left. And then Gridlock gets their first lead of the game at 7 with 2 minutes left on the clock, 17-16. First lead of the game for Gridlock. It was tied at 17s with about 30 seconds left, and Emma Peasley on Minnesota gets a hand block, and there was another turnover, and they just New York just basically held it and said, all right, we're just going to send this to overtime. We're not going to try a buzzer beater. We're just going to send this to overtime. Because I feel like in my opinion, it looked like New York had the momentum because they had just broken a few times to bring the game tied, and then they led. And so I feel like they had the momentum to be able to say, all right, we're going to go into overtime with this momentum. But Minnesota started off with a break in overtime off of 2 hucks that didn't connect for New York. And the break that they got, Sarah Mextroth to Jane Cook for the goal. Jane Cook is a problem. We're going to say this every single week. Problem.
Is that before we say it again?
Yeah. And then New York just kind of, when they were on offense again, they had a turnover. They overthrew Zoe Heck just a tiny bit near the sideline, and she couldn't reel it in to the line as well. And then there was a miscommunication, receiver to thrower error in the handler space for Minnesota to turn it over. This is still all in overtime. And then New York marches it down the field, and there was just a drop. Just Tulsa threw it right to the chest. It was a little low, but the receiver just kind of dropped it 7 yards out of the end zone. And then Minnesota started throwing it, and Sarah Mextroth had the disc, and everybody on New York just locked everybody up, and Sarah had to throw this bailout hammer that didn't connect. And then this is what kind of frustrated me at the very end here. There was about 7 seconds left, and there was a very, very questionable huck by New York. Like maybe the receiver, maybe the thrower thought that there was more time left on the clock, or less time on the clock, and they had to do a buzzer beater, because buzzer beaters are in the overtime rules.
Got it. Different than the WL.
Yeah. So buzzer beater and overtime, as well as, fourth quarter buzzer beaters. And it was just this questionable huck. She threw it into like 3 or 4 Minnesota defenders that were sitting deep. So that was strange to me that that decision was made. But ended in a turnover. Minnesota held it. Game over. Minnesota wins. Great game to watch. Yeah. Go watch it.
I mean, and a game with like incredible meaning, and one that I think we both had circled, and was the sort of question of like, how does the best of the Midwest, we've already talked about it, right? Minnesota, pretty clearly best of the Midwest, stack up against the East Division. Minnesota just pulling it out, and for me, I for one, the incredible throwing prowess of Robin and Ina is astounding, for one. I mean, I know we were talking in the Western Ultimate League about like, oh wow, Maggie O'Connor 7 assists. Robin and Ina go on throw 9 in a game each in the same game. But then also the meaning of it, right? Of Minnesota topping, basically with this, again, securing the Midwest Division, and then New York, they take their second loss of the season after losing to Philly, and that puts them way behind the 8 ball when you have DC and Philly remaining undefeated. So pretty big ramifications, going to make it even tougher for New York to have any chance of making it out of the East Division, because at the moment it's looking like DC and Philly are going to go to championship weekend. It's just a matter of which one wins the East Division and which one presumably gets ranked by the committee, which, speaking of which, didn't they say after week 6? We should get power rankings after this week, theoretically.
Yeah, we should be getting, should be.
Hopefully
sometime this week we will get them.
We're recording Tuesday evening, so TBD on that. But yeah, I think those are the biggest takeaways for me. Not surprised by the incredible throwing, and Minnesota feeling great about the Midwest Division standings. New York going to be ruining their chances at the end. And again, uphill climb for Gridlock from here.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. They've got on their schedule DC at home. So that's obviously going to be a very tough game, fun game to watch as well. And then 2 weeks later, they have Austin. Yeah, Austin in New York as well. Which, I mean, we can't say that Austin isn't going to like come out and give them a good game, because Austin's given everybody a good game that they've played.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We shall see. It'll be interesting. And I mean, yeah, tough on Gridlock as one of the teams that we thought were going to be one of the best teams, especially based on that roster coming in the season. Already seeing it 2 losses. And again, the playoff structure, the championship weekend structure, just going to make things really difficult. Say there were 6 teams that made it in, we might be having a different conversation, but instead, Gridlock might be on the outside looking in by the time we get to the end of the season. Anything else, Sash, before we take a quick break for talking WL stuff?
Looking forward ahead to this next week, looking at the schedule, we have Milwaukee playing 2 games in one day. Something I didn't really notice that was happening until Robin Fennig said something on Twitter, and I was like, oh wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at the schedule, it's like, oh, these are the weeks, and these are generally when it's going to happen, and okay, different double headers. And then the PO was like, all of our games are happening Saturday, and it was like, oh, Milwaukee is playing twice, which means they're playing twice on Saturday in 2 different states. And it's not even like they have a super early start time for one, or and it's a late start time for the other, 7 o'clock. But still, best of luck, Milwaukee. And, trying to avoid injury. I feel like, I don't know if we've talked about this on air, but if you look at like any other sport, especially I know that basketball, this has been looked at a lot. When players play a lot back to back, or a lot in a short span of time, there is a much higher likelihood for injuries. So I have my fingers crossed for the Monarchs players that they don't get injured with the two games in one day. And hopefully this doesn't happen going forward, because definitely not a severe competitive disadvantage for Milwaukee. No question about it.
For sure, because, I mean, Indy and Columbus are about 3 hours away from each other.
That's helpful context as a Californian.
Yeah. They are going to have to drive through Indy and around Columbus, essentially, or maybe it was the other way around. They're gonna have traffic on the way.
Yeah. So, good luck, Monarchs. We're gonna talk more PWL stuff when we get to our picks section, but for now, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, talking Western Ultimate League and the chaos that is the Northwest Conference. Don't go away. We will be right back. Our friends at VC Ultimate are proud to sponsor Double Overtime. VC proudly puts community over profit, focusing their support on initiatives that help promote inclusivity. As the first ever sponsor to back professional women's and non-binary Ultimate, VC puts its money where its mouth is when it comes to equitable action. VC also approaches product innovation intentionally to make more players feel like the Ultimate space is their own. Did you know that all VC core products are now 100% gender-free? If your team is in the market for uniforms or custom team gear, check out VCUltimate.com. Not only are they working to change the landscape of sport, VC's performance gear is the best on the field. Thanks to our sponsors of Double Overtime, VC Ultimate. And welcome back to Double Overtime, presented by VC Ultimate. We're talking Western Ultimate League action, the last of the Southwest Conference. San Diego and LA both finished up their regular seasons, and I would say the start of a gauntlet, although the gauntlet mostly comes this upcoming weekend for the Northwest Conference. Sascha, where should we start? Should we maybe start not in the Northwest Conference and then focus on the Northwest Conference going forward?
Yes, because, I mean, the Southwest Conference is already kind of decided, so...
Yeah, so it was decided ahead of the weekend. We had talked about that before. San Diego had, I think, after just like week 6, clinched their spot in championship weekend. San Francisco booking their tickets after their week 8 win over Arizona. And then it was San Diego playing at LA. I think you and I both thought, and I bet a lot of people would have thought that this was probably going to be a blowout, and it wasn't. It went to overtime. And it's not like... And LA eventually wins 12-11 in overtime. But this isn't necessarily like a game where San Diego didn't play their stars. Pretty much all of their top players played. It was just a matter of LA just about getting the better of them, and albeit pretty windy conditions. So props to Astra for closing out the season strong.
It's always nice to end on a W.
That's helpful. I mean, San Diego still gets a chance to do that, even though they end the regular season on a little bit of a down note. So this game, it was pretty close throughout. 4-2 LA after the first quarter, 6-6 at halftime, 8-8 after the third quarter, and 10-10 at the end of regulation. Astra did take a number of 2-point leads throughout the game at 4-2, 8-6, and 10-8 that they then gave up. So... not a ton of consistency, but also not a ton of consistency either if you're San Diego and you're giving up, a hold break combination type of a thing. So again, conditions were pretty clearly windy. But again, Kayla Helton, Dina Allen-Mellick, Alex Diaz, Kristen Bajunas all play for Super Blue. LA also at closer to full strength, though no Caitlin Weaver, no Camille Wilson. But Jasmine Childress, Maggie O'Connor, Chip Yant, Audrey Brown were all available. And all of those folks played a pretty big role. Also, Meredith Bile, scored at least 3 goals from my count, and Maggie O'Connor also grabbed a couple of goals as well. So nothing too major to report from this game. And San Diego finishes first in the Southwest. They scored up to 24 points in a game and did it twice, both against Arizona. Their lowest scoring output was 11 in this last game. And their overall point diff, Sasha, you probably have seen it in the doc, but if you were to guess at their overall point diff for the regular season over 8 games, what do you think San Diego's point differential would be?
So I know the number because I can see it. And I can see it on the stat on the Western Ultimate League schedule page. But I was not aware that it was this high. The point diff is 38.
38. And they lost 2 games, albeit 1 by 1, 1 by 2 or something at the beginning of the season.
Figure out where these games for 38.
It helps when you hit 24 points twice and you do it by an 8-goal margin and a 12-point margin, and then you win by 11 over LA and 7 over San Francisco.
Exactly what I was looking at. I'm like the beginning of the season was like they had a 4-point loss to Seattle. They had a 1-point win over Onyx. They had a 4-point win over the Falcons.
So through 3 games, that would have put them at only +1.
Yeah. And then they just...
and then +37 later.
Yeah. Yo.
I mean, and it's reflected, right, in the stats leaders. Kayla Helton, Dina Ali-Melik both finished with triple doubles. That is double-digit goals, assists, and blocks. Don't have exact numbers because the stats aren't updated as of Tuesday evening. But before the LA game, Alex Diaz had 22 goals to lead San Diego, then Kayla Helton at 18 goals, Blair Messner at 15 goals. Kayla Helton then led the team in assists, followed by Dina at 15 and Kristen Bajunas at 13 assists. And Dina led the team again ahead of the LA game with 13 blocks, then Kristen at 12, then Kayla at 11. Notably, Kayla Helton in the top 3 in all these stats ahead of the LA game. Turns out Kayla Helton, role games player, pretty good.
Who'd have thunk? Also, another notable stat for Kayla is the only player in the entire league so far. This is before any of the games this weekend, with 1,000 receiving yards and over 1,000 receiving yards and over 1,000 throwing yards as well.
Well, she would have just added to it from this past weekend against LA.
Exactly.
Because I didn't track all of the goals and assists, but Kayla was involved pretty regularly. As for Astra, they have the unfortunate label of being the only team in the Southwest Conference to not make it to championship weekend in either season so far. Notably, their offense, not super strong. They scored more than 15 only once, and that was in their double overtime loss to Utah where they scored 18 points. They did, however, win a game at home. This last game against San Diego was at home. The other 2 wins were on the road, one actually on the road at SF, one versus Arizona in San Diego during the Super Bloom Beach Bowl. Their overall stat leaders, again, not final. Meredith Bile, 14 goals. I think that actually does include my count of 3 against San Diego. Caitlin Weaver did not play against San Diego. 13 goals. Chip Yen at 11 goals. I think that includes the 2 that I counted against San Diego. Maggie O'Connor, far and away the assist leader at 19, followed by Jasmine Childress and Caitlin Weaver at 11. And Avalon Igawa and Meredith Bile tied at 13 blocks heading into the San Diego game. Notably, triple-double watch. There's a chance that if Caitlin Weaver played against San Diego, she could pick up a triple-double. She did not play against San Diego, therefore misses out on the triple-double. Notably, didn't play the first or the last games because she was coaching UC Santa Barbara Burning Skirts. So, yeah, disappointing for Astra back-to-back. But it's not like they've been terribly far away. Yeah, Caitlin Weaver was very close to getting a triple-double. I think just 2 blocks short, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
as well as close to having the 1,000 throwing and receiving yards too. I feel like if she had played those 2, she only needed less than 200 throwing yards to achieve that. So if she had played those 2 games, she probably would have been joining Kayla Helton up there.
Yeah, and that's something that we can continue to keep an eye on now that we have stats for this full season, and we have stats that I think are pretty accurate from last season. I think we'll be able to keep track going forward of where folks' stats are at from year to year and what sort of the benchmarks are. Is it going to be a regular thing for players to hit 1,000, or is it going to be pretty rare company? We're going to find out in the seasons to come. Also, scheduling things, right? 8 games in the regular season this year instead of 6 for last year.
Speaking of stats, a little peek behind the curtain and a little spoiler alert. Next week, we'll be going pretty deep into the WL stats, as we will be talking with some of the WL stats people.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Again, big stats nerds, so really excited to dive in with those folks. Sasha, should we dive into the chaos that is the Northwest Conference and your Utah Wild coming oh so close but oh so far? Let's start with the one that's maybe a little less painful. Utah at Seattle. Seattle wins 14-12. Tempest were up 13-6 with 3 minutes to play left in the third. Utah, big 6-0 run to bring the game within 1 at 13-12. And then just huck it away with their last possession, and it was game from there. Tough. Big comeback, not quite all the way there. Do you have anything to add?
I've got nothing.
So folks, I might be talking quite a bit in this section because this past weekend was rather painful for Sasha's Utah Wild. So again, don't have exact stats from the Seattle game. Wouldn't be surprised if all the same names stepped up for Seattle and also for Utah. We'll get to some of their primary contributors when we talk about the Utah-Oregon game. That was my assignment. Another OT game. We did have 3 overtime games. We said the Minnesota one was first. The Oregon-Utah game actually happened on Fridays. Technically, that one was the first. Sasha, do you have anything else to add before I, unfortunately, re-traumatize you when talking about this game?
I will have things to say at the end.
All right. Let's give folks a summary. If you haven't watched this game, you should watch it. It's a good game, like all the others. Pretty close throughout the early going. It was 2-all at the end of the first quarter. It was 6-all at halftime. And it was an 8-7 Utah lead after the third quarter. Back and forth, pretty balanced. Both teams playing pretty well. And at this point, Utah had only lost a single game to Colorado on the road. And had they won this game, again, this was Friday before the Seattle loss. Had they won this game, they would have gone to 4 wins and not guaranteed themselves championship weekend, but gone a lot closer to it. And in the process, would have, I think, eliminated Oregon just straight up. I think that would have put Oregon at 5 losses. They would have been out. See you later. It didn't happen. So let's cut a little bit forward to the fourth quarter. And Utah's up late, 11-8 with under 6 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. Then it's a hold from Oregon, clean offense. The rain's starting to come down a little bit. Not a surprise for Oregon. Credit Eisenbray, who got a number of assists, 3 by when all was said and done. Got a run-through block and the immediate assist to Morgan Zajan, who picked up 3 goals for Oregon. It's 11-10. Okay. Within 1 point, Utah, though, receiving, and there is just not very much time left in the game. So Utah possesses for a little bit, turns it on reset with 45 seconds left. So now Oregon gets a chance to tie with 45 seconds left. However, the Wild defense does a great job, really locked down defense. Stall count rises, and as we've seen frequently in the Western Ultimate League, high stall often relates to a hammer throw, and so a hammer pings off the hands of what felt to be at least 2 or 3 different players, at least 1, if not 2, different Onyx players, drops to the turf. On the stream, or on the video, if you go back and watch it, because there were some like technical issues, so they re-uploaded it. So it's under the videos if you look it on YouTube for the Western Ultimate League. Anyway, it looks like there's like 17 seconds left, but then by the time the wild player goes and picks it up, it's like under 10 seconds, maybe under 7 seconds left. So really, you could just hold the disc or throw it once, say behind you with a dump, and that would be game. 1 point lead, possession, you maintain possession, done. One throw. Instead, it's a throw upfield. It's a turn. It's a block, and it's back immediately the other way. And throw goes up. Julius Sherwood puts up the throw. It's Trout Wainwright who rises above their defender and catches it. Their first goal of the game. Send in overtime 11-11. Notably, Onyx didn't need to like immediately score. Again, possession rules. Ultimate players seem to forget that on a regular basis when it comes to the professional leagues. But anyway, Trout gets up, gets the goal. And then from there, it's a missed reset throw from Utah. And it's an immediate break chance. And Bartlett to Alston, 12-11. Trout with a run-through block this time. And Trout gets his second goal from Clyde Tajima, 3 assists. And Oregon gets a block deep. And Bartlett again involved, 14-11. Ice game over at this point. Basically, Utah gets 1, maybe 2 consolation goals. TBD, need to clarify this. Seems like it was 15-13 by my count / the stream. 15-12 on the website. We're going to get some clarification on that to make sure that's all cleared up before this upcoming weekend. 15-12, 15-13. It's an Oregon win. Utah falls despite having the disc and needing to literally throw one reset pass and instead throws it upfield. It gets blocked, and that's all she wrote by the end of it. And it's just really painful. Again, for a situation where Utah wins, they eliminate Oregon, they put themselves in great position, and now it gets complicated. Sascha, shall we get into it? What do you want to start with? The scenarios or the late game decision making that seems to be an issue for teams? And this is not, to be fair, not just a Utah thing. It feels like a little bit of karma for me of like San Francisco also made these types of mistakes, 2-point swings. There's also a moment in the first quarter of this Oregon-Utah game where it was a 2-point swing. Utah had the disc late in the first quarter, turned it over. Oregon takes it the other way and scores. Just teams are killing themselves with these opportunities, just blowing their opportunities with these mistakes. And it's not because the players aren't skilled. Players are extremely skilled, which makes it all the more painful to see them make these types of what feels like fundamental errors, especially late in a season. Like, the adjustment period should be over. You should be adjusted to possession rules. And coaches hopefully already talk about this because we've hounded it on the podcast. Just dump it backwards. Anything. Do not throw into traffic. Sascha, your thoughts?
Just straight up, it's honestly like unacceptable at this point. And it's not like everyone is going back and forth between rule sets either. How many college players are in the WL? There's like maybe like 5 or 6, maybe.
There's not a ton. And
there's not a ton.
Of those, they include Trout Wainwright.
Yeah, and like, so you're not playing with a different set of rules and then going and playing this game right now. I mean,
unless it's like club tryouts things, but even then, it's tryout season.
And it's not like anybody's not practicing these. I asked after this weekend, I asked a lot of different people from different teams, like, do they practice these situations at practice? And everyone said, yes, we do practice end of quarter clock situations, scenarios and stuff at practice. I'm like, so why is this happening? Like, I don't.
It's the pressure of the moment or something. And look, right, it's very easy for us to sit and play armchair quarterback or armchair handler, as it were, and be like, ah, yes, this is what you should do. This is what I would do in that position. But like, for me, it's not right. Ultimate, you don't always have to throw upfield. This is a well-established thing. And yes, a reset throw is not always going to be immediately open. And it's not always easy to get those off. And there are plenty of turnovers on reset throws. We saw a number of them from Utah at the end of that game in the rain. It is not an easy thing to do necessarily, but I would rather bank on my players trying to find a smidgen of space or running that little like, I would, people have different names for it, like the jab cut when you're trying to like bust through a cup where a handler cuts from behind their other handler and does a little jump and catch, and then you try and punch it through the cup. Like, I feel like there are ways to try this that would be easier and less risky than throwing upfield. And I just don't understand why it's not just if there is little time on the clock, you throw it backwards, or you do your best to throw it backwards. I also don't know, right? Is a situation where these points maybe take a longer time sometimes, and players like aren't used to checking the clock to see where it is. But in this situation, I swear there's at least 5 or 7 seconds, if not 10, where a Utah player was like, turnover happens, Utah player goes over to pick up the disc, and it's like, you have time to check the scoreboard, which I would hope has the correct time on it. And you should be able to check and realize, oh, there is 14 seconds left. There is 12 seconds left. Whatever. Be like, I need to hold this disc to stall 5, or at least to stall 4, and then find a reset. And if there's still more time, then I get in a position where I get the next reset. And you just go backwards. And if you're getting guarded really tightly, then you have someone else fill in. And I don't care if you have 4 handlers, because you're not going upfield. It doesn't matter. There have to be ways. And again, coaches presumably talk about this and teach this. And this is not, I am not saying anything new or brilliant. And I should not be the one that is saying this, but it also feels pretty self-evident that you get to a certain point, you check the clock, and you go backwards. And you put yourself in situations where your players try and win their one-on-one matchups, where you don't have other defenders in the way, and you go backwards. And again, this is not only on Utah. This has happened. It feels like freaking every single team in the Western Ultimate League, and arguably in both leagues.
I talk a lot about random things of the AUDL because that's what I can play as a man, and that is what I know with clock situation ultimate. So in the AUDL, what we did on the cannons, at least, I don't know if other teams did this, was like the sideline would be watching the clock, because I mean, sometimes you just get in the zone on the field. Like it happens. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like that happens a lot everywhere, and probably what happens most of the time with these situations in the WL as well. And as a sideline, like while you're on the sideline and the clock is low, we would yell out like how much time is left. Like when it starts to get under a minute, we would say 1 minute, and then we would say like 45, and then we'd say 30, and then we'd go 10 seconds. We go 20, 15, and then 20, 15, 10, 5. Like we would yell out how much time is left on the clock for everybody on the field. Again, I don't know what's happening on the field at these games. I don't know if that's what's happening and it's just not getting through, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, or there's not that sort of like practice of like making players aware, because it's possession. Great, but it from what it seems from the outside, every player's instinct, which I understand from, playing untimed, quote unquote, untimed ultimate, right? When we have time cap, whatever, but like untimed ultimate is you try and progress the disc because you're trying to score. This is a different game. These are different settings and situations. It fundamentally has to be different. And even with possession, it's not a buzzer beater. But guess what? It's the same idea of you need to be aware of the clock because the clock changes how you approach the game. And again, I don't like saying this because it feels like I'm saying things that are already obvious. Like, I almost hope that folks listen to this and they're like, thanks, Captain Obvious. That wasn't helpful at all because we already talked about it. It's like, great. I want to see it on the field. Again, it's not a question of players' ability, not a question of players' IQ, their ability to execute necessarily. It is something is not clicking between the understanding of the end of game situations or end of quarter situations and what is happening on the field. And again, sounds like we're harping on Utah for this. San Francisco, same freaking thing against Utah in week 7. End of quarter, just not, and I know, again, easier said than done. If you dump it at stall 5, then you're only burning 5 seconds off and you have to burn 20 seconds, and that's 4 throws. We see teams throw 4 complete passes, not a problem against zone looks all the time. It's just tough. Because then you get a situation where Utah, let's get into the scenarios, it's freaking complicated because there's different point differentials, there's different head-to-heads, there's different tiebreakers. We could get in a situation, Sasha, where we could go to a freaking coin flip. We could get to a point where we have a coin flip would be required, which you've said toss out the coin flip because everyone's there. So just do a foot race.
Yeah,
was your suggestion at least.
If it comes down to a coin flip, I don't think that it should just like flip a coin after everything is over. Everyone's there in the same spot. Everyone's going to be in Colorado. Let's just have a foot race. So just have the fastest player on each team just go, and whoever wins goes to championship weekend. Great. I think that'll be more entertaining. And live stream it too.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, some of these different scenarios involve Utah and Colorado tying at 4-4 because that's possible. That's when we get to, I think, our probably most likely coin flip tiebreaker scenario because those two teams have already played each other and they already have an even point differential in their head-to-head. So we can already skip down in the tiebreakers a bit because we already know that. There's also a chance that there's a 3-way tie at 3-5 between Oregon, Colorado, and Utah, which gets complicated. Seemingly from our off-screen calculations, because we did pay the math budget this week, Oregon would win out in terms of tiebreakers against Utah and Colorado. So if you're an Onyx fan, you are hoping that you get to a tiebreaker situation and that you beat out, or you just beat the teams out anyway. But you hope you can get to a point where you have the advantage in any potential tiebreaker situation. But yeah, Seattle is probably going to win the Northwest Conference. They need to win a single game, and then they will top the conference. And then it could be any of the 3. I sent Sasha a couple different revisions of this, but I have at least 50 lines again of text of just here are all the different ways that this can play out. Here's the different point differentials and how it can go down. So if you want that, at OOT Pod on Twitter or doubleovertime@ultiworld.com, reach out and I can share that out with the individual people.
It's very complicated. Make sure you have a clear brain in order to read it because it will mess you up.
Yeah. So and then that's it. And we're done with
regular season.
The regular season of the Western Ultimate League. Somehow already it's going to be done after this upcoming week. Sasha, any other thoughts on time management things? Or should we get to our picks?
Kind of. I had a couple of Oregon Onyx players in my DMs and in my mentions say, "Oh, you picked Utah to come into our house and beat us." Listen, yes, you won. You were pretty much beat. Seconds. Literal seconds.
Moments away.
Literally one throw. Okay? So don't come at me with the, "Oh, you picked them to come into our house and beat us." You were seconds away from losing that game. Okay? That's all I have to say. One throw away from losing that
One
game.
throw. It feels a little bit different when it's like 30 seconds or 40 seconds left. It feels a lot easier to be like, just don't turn it over when you have to complete like 4 or 5 passes or 8 passes or whatever it is. When it's one throw, ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Speaking of ouch, Sascha, you fell behind in picks again.
Yeah.
On the back of 2 overtime games that I picked correctly in both of them, unfortunately for you. I picked Oregon instead of Utah. I did not have any Onyx players in my DMs. We both picked Seattle correctly. We both picked San Diego incorrectly in the other OT game of the weekend. I picked Minnesota. You picked New York. Again, barely scraping by in these overtime games. We both correctly picked New York. We both incorrectly picked Atlanta to win on the road at Indy. And we both correctly picked DC to win. That moves me to 31-15 and you to 27-19. So a 4-pick gap at this point as we will pick for the final weekend of the Western Ultimate League regular season. Sascha, should we start with your Utah Wild getting their revenge against Oregon Onyx in Colorado at Rocky Mountain Rumble?
They are getting the revenge.
And I'm going to pick Onyx again.
At a neutral site.
At elevation. So arguably maybe not even that neutral. Look, we got to keep it spicy. And if we're going to keep it spicy, then I got to pick differently than you. I might as well do it in this case. Seattle at Colorado. I will pick Seattle.
I am also picking the Seattle. Now, Utah at Seattle. This is a little tough because, like, at first, truthfully, last week, I thought that Seattle was just going to come out and win by like 4 or 5 goals. Like,
they nearly did.
They nearly
until
did.
That late run.
So it's tough. And now that was at home for Seattle.
And now they're going to be at elevation in Colorado.
It is not easy to play at home at Seattle. Okay? Now they're going to be in Colorado. Is it my turn to pick first or is it your turn
to pick first?
Yes, it is. Oh. Okay, I'm picking.
You know if Utah wins out that they make championship weekend, right?
Yeah, I do know that.
Okay.
I know that. I'm going to pick. I think I have to pick Seattle.
Okay. I will also pick Seattle.
It's just what my gut is saying.
Seattle has only lost once all season, even if they've played close games. They did that last season too. They played some close games. And they also blew some people out and then went undefeated. I continue to think that Seattle is arguably the best team, if not one of the best 2 teams in the league. So I'll pick them over Utah. Oregon versus Colorado. This was a bit of a blowout in Oregon in the reverse fixture. We go Oregon again. I'm gonna pick PNW sweep at altitude, but I think those teams, at least on paper, certainly Seattle, less so for Oregon, are gonna have too much for Utah and Colorado.
I also think that Oregon will win this one.
Okay, so this would put. Well, okay, so in my picks, it is Oregon and Seattle making it to championship weekend. In your picks, it's Seattle, and then it is a 4-4 Utah in a head. I think in this case, Utah would just make it at 4-4, based on your picks.
Based on my picks,
because what the Wild need is they need to beat Oregon and they need Seattle to beat Colorado. That gives both Oregon and Colorado their 5th loss of the season. It gives Utah their 4th win.
And they're into
championship weekend. So You have picked a correct combination to get Utah into championship weekend.
Let's go.
Now we're just gonna see how it plays out. So yeah, and that will do it for our Western Ultimate League regular season picks. We'll check back in on our preseason championship weekend picks once this weekend is over. We'll see if we decide to count those or not. I think Sasha, from what I remember, is going to be against us using the preseason picks. But POL, we still got plenty of weeks left, even if we already have a team eliminated. Which, speaking of which, Milwaukee plays their single day doubleheader. We're going to see if that sticks, but probably, given stadium rentals and all. I think this is once again your pick, Sasha. Milwaukee at Indy.
I think that Indy will get this win.
I will agree with you. I mean, Indy won at home against Atlanta, and I don't know if Milwaukee is a better team than Atlanta. Milwaukee at Columbus, the back end of their single-day doubleheader. I said earlier how that's not usually a recipe for success, and it's usually a recipe for injury, so I will take Columbus to win at home.
I am also doing that.
All right, should we pick the really spicy game or the less spicy game and then finish on the really spicy game?
Finish on the real spicy game.
Okay, Raleigh at Atlanta. Radiance, 2-1. You know, maybe, Sasha?
Radiance.
Great, I will do the same. I mean, the college kids have a little bit of time before nationals. I think Radiance is going to have too much talent for Seoul. Even though Seoul's looked, I think, better this year. Certainly looked better against Minnesota. They're playing at home again. This could be closer, but I think Raleigh will just about take it. And then we have the battle of the undefeated teams. I mean, Minnesota's also undefeated. But the East Division, undefeated teams.
I think you got to go first for this one now.
I do.
I know who I'm picking, and I'll give you my reasons in a minute, but you go first.
I go first.
Yep.
Philadelphia Surge, undefeated. Away at DC Shadow, also undefeated. Both teams with pretty good point differential. I want to check their point diffs. 40 for DC and 19 for Philly, although they only played half of one game. So, strength of schedule, notably, not even 0.2 for DC and 0.47 for Philly. DC playing a much softer schedule so far. Gosh. The thing is, I've picked against Philly, and it's been me in the butt before. But that plus 40, I'm going DC.
Going with DC.
Picking the home team. Picking
right.
against Philly again. I'm sorry, Surge. I believe in you. I do. I really, really do. And I also gotta keep things interesting because I have a feeling.
I believe in them more.
Yeah, I had a feeling that you're
I
going
am
to pick
picking
them.
Philly.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's an away game for Philly, but do you know how far Philly is from DC?
Not very far.
It is only 2.5 hours. I would not be surprised if the whole group of Philly people came down to DC because it's only a 2.5 hour drive.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. And did I remember? I saw something that I was intrigued by. No, all these games are happening on Saturday, May 13th. I was looking ahead to week 8, DC at New York under the Friday Night Lights. So, should be fun. Last thing, highlight of the week. It is Trout Waybright going up to secure the catch over their defender to send the game between the Oregon Onyx and Utah Wild into overtime in a game that Oregon would eventually go on to win.
Oh my God! Big goal! Pulls it down with a second and a half on the clock. This game's still wide open. Big goal over the top here. Charlie out! Tied in, ladies and gentlemen. 11-11 on the clock, on the scoreboard. We are zeroed out, going to overtime.
Trout getting his first goal of the game and doing it in some style, rising up for the not game winning, game tying, felt like game winning, and Oregon did go on to win. So that is our highlight of the week, or if you're a Utah Wild fan like one Sascha Vogel, it might be your low light of the week.
R.I.P.
Rip. Good luck to all the teams playing this upcoming weekend, especially all of the Northwest Conference teams. I will be doing my best to follow along in all the madness, trying to figure out what of the various scenarios and point differentials that we'll have to care about and pay attention to. It may be as simple as Utah beats Oregon and Seattle beats Colorado, and then the other games don't really matter in terms of advancing to championship weekend. But we will find out. Sascha, any last thoughts before we sign off?
No. I'm excited for the weekend. It's going to be really exciting to watch. And I hope everybody watches.
Tune in for sure. The Western Ultimate League YouTube page. Sascha Vogel, I've been Jenna Weiner. We'll talk to you on the next episode of Double Overtime presented by VC Ultimate.
Bye.